So I recently came across this video where Dr. Phil responds to the Turnabout Rants Abuse Endured by Bhad Bhabie. And so I'm going to go ahead and watch this clip. This is a blind react, and we're going to go ahead and analyze it and talk about it together.
Dr. Phil McGraw. So Phil, I'm reading the New York Post this weekend. I open up this story about a teen rapper named Bhad Bhabie.
Already you can tell she doesn't even know the name. If she would have just taken 5 seconds to do a little more research, she would have known that's Bhad Bhabie. So it's clear to me that she probably didn't do much research.
Bhabie, and her real name is Danielle Bragoli, and she's saying, I want an apology from Dr. Phil, and if I don't get an apology by some date, I'm going to handle it my own way. She says that I was on his show 5 years ago, and I was recommended to go off to this boot camp, and they were abusive at this boot camp. I want to play this, the soundbite from your show, so everybody knows who this person is and what she was like at 13 years old. Her mom brought her on the show to say, I can't handle her anymore. So here.
So real quick, one thing that they're doing by playing this clip is this is a way to discredit an opponent is by using past stuff or by taking something out of context or any sort of thing. Well, here what they're doing is they're going to be like, look at this kid. They're essentially implying, look at this kid, look at her at 13, she's out of control. Do you really believe somebody like this? Clearly this person's unstable. When there's a few different things that come to mind right away is, first of all, that was her at 13. Second, the biggest stage of development that you have is throughout adolescence. It's one of the biggest stages of development. Up until 25 is when you have major growth spurts. So the three broad stages of development, they're going to be early childhood, middle childhood, and adolescence. And so they're defined by the primary task of development in each stage. And some great examples would be, you would look at how are they acting, how they're developing physically, how's their speech, what about their intellect, what about their cognitive development. And you're going to look at this over the course of adolescence, right? So it's important to keep in mind that specific changes occur at specific stages of life. It should be also important to reflect and think about, yeah, you're looking at her at 13, but clearly she develops a lot, which is reflecting why we have certain laws and ages of consent. And a lot of laws revolve around us being 18, 21, etc., because these are widely accepted as where we are able to more rationally be able to make independent decisions for ourselves. And it's more accepted on the idea, backed upon science, that during life as a teenager you tend to make more rash, more rash, irrational, selfish decisions that aren't very thought out, and this is part of the development process, which is why we say children can't consent, for example, because they're not emotionally, physically, and mentally developed. And they also, and not just with that, but this reflects in how children might give stupid or bad takes or have a bad attitude. I know, for example, for me, when I was growing up, I had a lot of growing up to do. I had a lot of maturing to do. Between the ages of 13 to I'm now 25, I'm considered, right at fully developed at this age. I'm a completely different person. I'm sure that speaks to a lot of other people too. So we're going to go ahead and continue now.
Here's that moment off your show.
And all these hoes laughing like so funny.
She's talking about the audience, that they're laughing at her.
Did you say the hoes are laughing?
Yep.
So the audience are a bunch of hoes?
Yep. Catch me outside, how about that?
Huh?
Catch me outside, how about that?
Catch you outside? What does that mean?
What I just said.
Catch her outside and she'll go outside and do what she has to do. That's what she's talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Boy.
So, again, what they're trying to do is try and discredit her. So, I remember seeing a quote, and it essentially was saying something along the lines of, I can't remember, and apologies for not doing it justice, but it was, when you silence a man, you're not proving him wrong. What you're doing is showing that you fear that he is right, what he has to say. And so there's a number of reasons people try to discredit you. And of course it could be that but the main one we're looking at here is that he may try to protect himself, his image, his perception, and he might feel threatened by the allegations. Because Daniel Bergoli is not the only one to come out. News around this is all over YouTube. It's all over Facebook. It's all over not MySpace. MySpace is a dead site. It's all over Twitter, Reddit. You look it up on Google, and there's tens of hundreds of accounts documenting this stuff extensively.
I had a vague recollection of that young, and by the way, let's remind everyone, that was 13. Not sure how I would have handled that 13-year-old if she were my 13-year-old. But let's talk about her and what she's now doing in her accusations. She says that the place that she was recommended to go was abusive to her, wouldn't let her sleep. What are your responses to her?
Also, before the response, I want to add that this is completely against the ethics guideline for practicing psychology in general, which is why Phil McGraw doesn't have his license. He hasn't had it since 2006, and I hate to call him Dr. Phil because he's definitely not going by what any therapist would do. So I'm just going to call him Phil McGraw. And I don't know if I mentioned this yet in the video, but Dr. Todd Grande, he may have his own issues recently, his own controversies going on recently, but that doesn't change the fact that he has extensively done a good example of pointing out what Phil McGraw does wrong. One of the biggest things is that he's bringing these desperate people who really want help up onto a stage, and he makes sensationalized titles, and he looks for the worst of the worst people. And he puts them in front of a very judgmental audience, right? And says, oh, looky here, look at these people, and, he makes fun of them and he talks down to them. The only reason this show is allowed is because it's, seen as entertainment, and not, as a therapy session. But then he gives psychological advice sometimes and puts it in his own 2 cents. The dude, again, has not renewed his license since 2006. Which bothers me and worries me because it makes me think he's not up to date, right, with even the basics of such things as the DSM. So we have an out-of-touch, fat old white guy just really spouting off shit. Nonsense, probably.
Well, she went to Turnabout 4 or 5 years ago, and if she had a bad experience, obviously I would hate that. We'd be sorry about that. But we don't have anything to do with what happens with guests once they leave the stage. I mean, that's between the guardian and the parent and whatever facility they go to. So we're not involved in that. We don't have any feedback from them. So whatever happens once they're there, that's between them and the facility. I assume she had a problem. She filed a complaint with the proper authorities or something 5 years ago. So I really don't know much about it.
Now, this is known, and also apologies if you can hear my guinea pigs in the background. They're popcorning and jumping around. They've been very excited all day. So you have to forgive me if you hear them. But to the point, this is known as diffusion of responsibility. So the dude is saying, I'm in no way affiliated with these people. I don't know what's going on here. I'm not responsible for what happens. And let's just run that train of thought, right? Let's just run with it and say, okay, you're right. If you have no idea what's going on, and you're putting all the responsibility on them, and you're sending them to the place that you have no idea of what's going on, then why the fuck are you sending them there? If you don't check in, if you don't follow up, if you have no idea, you didn't think that far through. The only reason you would say this is, one, because you're an ignorant, dumb fuck who's out of touch. Or two, you were trying to point the finger at somebody else to save your own ass. And either one is not good. Even worse if it's both. You should know what's going on. I would not just send my child, for example, away to places I had no fucking idea about. You need to treat these people like they're your own children, And you need to show them compassion, care, and love. Because, you might argue that, it's not my responsibility. But look, there's still a large section of people, Phil McGraw, that look at you as a credible source in the field of psychology, and they're coming to you in a state of desperation, and you're using them as like a meal ticket to popularity, fame, and money.
So that there's the other issue is like when you have a child like that who is incorrigible. I mean, I just watched that behavior and I thought, wow, first of all, calling a group of people you don't know who are mostly your elders a bunch of hoes and then saying, catch me outside, how about that? Meaning I'm going to beat you up outside. We didn't even show the part of the clip where she came at her mom on the stage because her mom said she was mouthy. You know, what do you do with young people like that? What else is there but some tough love, you know, at a ranch or where else? You can't coddle kids like that.
And again, just listener, she's trying to say, oh yeah, she was disruptive at 13, so therefore she's wrong. Do we really have to go into how that doesn't make any sense? You're not addressing the points. It's not just her that's making the allegations. And you want to say, oh, well, we got a tough love, you can't just coddle. What these people do a lot of times when they don't know anything about a subject is they oversimplify everything. They make these simple statements like it's this way or it's that way. Sometimes you got to give tough love. Okay, let's walk that through. What do you define as tough love? What specifically exactly do you find as tough love? Because what I find a lot of times these people do is they speak and they use global thinking, right? And what that means is they're being very broad. They're not giving the specifics. So a good exercise practice to do better at that is, okay, how do you take a shower? So somebody takes a shower, you say, well, I hop in the shower, I get wet, and I dry off. Okay, well, what do you do then? Let's get a little more specific. Hop in the shower, apply the shampoo, wash it out, dry off. Okay, let's get a little more specific. And you keep going, right? And you keep going until you can break stuff down step by step by step by step by step. And the point isn't to do that with simple tasks, but with these complex issues that you look at from multiple perspectives, you have to be able to break these down into complex thinking. What she's thinking is, she bad at 13, she problem 13, she problem now, tough love. And she called it Bhad Bhabie. This woman doesn't even do research into what the lady's name is. And she wants to offer her opinion on stuff. I thought part of being on the news was to be impartial and not give your opinion and just do interviewing. But hey, whatever.
Well, you know, I think every situation is different, and there are a lot of these children, teenagers and adolescents that my approach has been, I don't ask myself why you're the way you are, I ask myself why not, because if you look at their upbringing, and I'm not talking about this story, it was 5 years ago, I don't remember too much about it, but, you know, kids are raised in different environments, and you got to look at each case separately. Some of them were raised in a lot of chaos and a lot of turmoil, and so they do what they have to survive. But you still have to protect them from themselves. And I think that the main thing is to, you know, get the child through that year, then get them through the next year, then the next year, and then pretty soon they're adults and you've gotten them through that tough patch. And that's the hard thing that parents have to make a decision about is, you know, what path do I take? And, you know, we point parents in a direction of, I try to be an emotional compass and point parents in a direction. If they're being inconsistent with their parenting or something, I try to point that out, put it on a to-do list for them. But the real work starts, you know, once they get home and have to realign what they're doing. And it's not easy in this day and time. There's social media influences, fast-paced life. Kids grow up really fast these days.
You know what, Phil? I got to tell you, the more I hear from teachers and coaches and other parents of the behavior of kids at school, I mean, I thought it was shocking when a teacher told me, 5 or 6 years ago, that the kids regularly drop F-bombs at the teacher, telling them to F this and F you and all the rest, and that's normal. And now my kids who are in middle school and high school say it is normal. How did we get to this point where you're allowed, A, to drop an F-bomb anywhere if you're a kid, and B, that you're allowed to do that to a teacher?
Well, you know, it's just...
So, as you can tell from his response, he didn't even address the allegations. He hasn't said anything about the allegations. He hasn't addressed what she said, Daniel Bergoli, or any of the other numerous claims against him. He just simply responded, kids are bad today. It's difficult. This is a tough world. No shit. You're making these global, broad statements. And then this woman, goes along and sucks his dick, sucks him right off along with him, right? Like, look at the kids today. That's why I hear a lot of boomers out of touch say all the time, look at the kids today. But these are the same people, nothing against Christians because I'm one. But these are the same people, I've seen this meme and I love it. But it's like, Christians 30 minutes before screaming at a waitress, screaming at a 16-year-old waitress. It shows them worshiping Jesus, And, once they get out of their church service, they go to, Sunday breakfast or Sunday lunch, right? Right after church and praising about how great God is. And they go and scream and yell and, just act belligerent. And, we want to talk about how they want to talk about how our generation is so bad. And I'll definitely say there are things we can improve. But you want to sit there, look, in the 1950s, 1900s, African Americans didn't have equal rights. There was even a time where women couldn't, where women couldn't vote. There was a time where teachers were allowed to, abuse children. And by the way, spanking is abuse. Come at me with that one. There's studies and research that shows that, by accredited clinical psychologists. And then we also have, that women couldn't open bank accounts, amongst other things, right? And gay marriage was just recently legalized within my lifetime, for example, quite recently. Of course, I'm grateful for Roe v. Wade as well. And the point being that our generation has pushed, we definitely have issues, but my generation has definitely pushed a lot more for actual equal rights where everybody's equal. It's not this selective bullshit. Or, man, I could go on and on, but the point being that the previous generation was really ignorant. And we didn't know much about the field of mental health either, right? Even just 20, 30 years ago, right? Look at the shit like the lobotomy, for example. That was a monstrous thing that went on. And ethics behind psychology as well, right? Like the monster experiment. There was this one experiment, the white rabbit experiment with this child, and a couple others where, even with psychologists themselves, when they were doing psychological experiments, the ethics behind it was terrible. We're definitely a lot more of a loving generation, I'd say. And there are exceptions to that. Like, I'm not saying my generation is perfect, far from it. I'm totally against cancel culture. I don't think that's productive in the least. But to sit there and say our generation is just this way, all we are is blank, would be the same as if I said the previous generations offered nothing to me. I'm definitely grateful for the traditional values that I've been instilled in. I follow monogamy, for example. I believe heavily in monogamy. And I'm grateful for previous generations, and some of the values they taught me. But then there's others, right, that I don't like. So you take what is useful and then you discard the rest. And I think you should do that with the previous generation and with the current.
Just a lack of consequences. And I think teachers are modern day heroes. I think they spend more time with our children sometimes than we do because they spend, 8 to 3:30 with our kids, probably 40% of their waking hours. But there's a lack of consequences. These children are really with adults that are hamstrung on terms of what they can do, in terms of what they can visit on the child in terms of consequences. Can they take them out of the classroom? Can they require them to do additional work? Can they put them into counseling where they learn better communication skills or whatever? And until we put that kind of thing in the curriculum.
Yeah, pretty much the rest of the video. We're going to skip ahead and see if he says anything else.
It's not a little bit about geography. Got to become part of the curriculum. And curriculum for it better.
I'll not finish this line of questioning. I have to fit in a break, but when I come back, can I ask you a little bit more? And that is that, look, when we were kids, we got the strap, we got the brush. If you were at school, you might have had to put your hands out and you'd get the ruler. But there was some amount of pain that came along with bad behavior. And I know that the spanking debate has been well worn out long ago, but now we're dealing with a generation of kids who tell teachers to F off. And I'm just wondering, like, have we made a mistake in saying we've got to find another route? This is for after the break. I want you to think about where we can go next, especially as parents, in bringing these kids into line and figuring out consequences that do work, because many of us use timeouts and they don't work.
So timeouts do work, as a matter of fact, actually. It's about how long is the timeout, how is it done. You can see her smile. And she was sort of like, the way she was saying it was, she was almost like prying to Dr. Phil, like, please, sorry, I don't mean to call it Dr. Phil McGraw. She's in her mind, hey, Dr. Phil, you're a doctor, you're a psychologist, you can support me, you have credibility. If you agree with me, that reinforces my own beliefs, it reinforces my way of thinking. And she's like, well, it worked for me, in her mind. So, and kids behave when they get hit. No, it's not how it works, dude. Spanking is abuse all the way. Listen, pain compliance is a real thing, but it's not explaining the reasoning behind it, right? Just because you're getting somebody to comply does not mean you're teaching them the right thing. It's a fear response. It's just the same way with abuse victims. When they comply through getting hit, only to a much more severe extreme, right? And I've been an abuse victim, and it sucks. It's terrible. And what happens is you're complying from fear of retaliation, right? It's not because you think they're right. And what can build up is this deep-seated resentment. We see this with children who are spanked and stuff. They build up this deep-seated resentment, some of them, towards the parents. You might argue, well, this person turned out right or this person turned out right. Great. That's awesome that they did. That does not, that does not excuse the rest of the children who don't turn out right because of that. And, of course, you want to discipline your children. But at some point, you can't spank them. Let me ask you a question. What happens when they get older? Let's say they're bigger than you and stuff, and now you can't spank them. What then, man? What are you going to do then? If your only response was physical violence, then you have nothing else, then you're fucked. So, sorry for the sudden pause. One of my family members called me, and I was talking to them. So again, I'm not dissing people if they educate themselves better, but the literature right now just says that flat out spanking is not a good form of a punishment. At best, it's inconsistent. Some children might turn out great from it, but others, there's plenty of documented evidence that you can easily look up that shows the harms and ramifications of such. Well, my family member's calling again, so this is Cow King signing off. Until next time.